What does water represent in the context of dreams, visions, hallucinations, and within religion? So the first thing which water can represent is a boundary between the conscious and unconscious world. So that's to say that the surface of a lake or the surface of the water comes to represent a simile for the experience of what is conscious and what is unconscious. Someone living in the ancient world, the lake's surface would have represented this kind of boundary between the physical and the spiritual world. And in fact, we find within Celtic mythology stories of people throwing things into lakes. They would throw sacred objects or offerings into lakes with the intention of those things entering the spirit world. So that the surface of the water represents the boundary between the conscious and the unconscious psyche. That's to say, the boundary between the material and the spirit world. Alternatively, we also see water used as the symbol for creation. So we find in the biblical account how in the beginning the world was a formless void of water over which the Spirit of God blew. We find that in Genesis 1, verse 1. So that the world is represented as this formless void of forces, unconscious forces, which are not organized or brought into manifestation except by the will of God. Alternatively, in Egyptian mythology, we find the exact same symbolic form. The waters of Nun stretch out in all directions infinitely, and it's up out of this infinite abyssal waters that the mound of Benben rises up, and atop of Benben is the god Atum. And Atum is the Egyptian god responsible for the creation of the world. We can look over to Mesopotamian mythology. In Enuma Elish, we have Tiamat in the abyssal waters, the primordial waters, who's slain by the god Marduk, and her corpse, Tiamat's corpse, is then subsequently used to create the world. And again, in Hinduism, we find the exact same mythic form being employed, where an egg rises up out of these same waters, and Brahman, the creator god, opens this egg to create the world. And the significance of it is that the waters, again, represent the unconscious psyche. So what's being described here is not the creation of the material world. What's being described here is the creation of our mind. Genesis chapter 1 and 2 is not reliable for telling us about the creation of the material world. Rather, it is reliable for telling us about the development and creation of our psyche. That's important. Alternatively, we could see the symbol of water being employed as a symbol for the underworld. If we go down to Latin America, we find the cenotes. And the cenotes were sacred sites for the Aboriginal peoples living in that area in the Yucatan Peninsula. And the cenote represented a place where the people could meet the gods. And they would throw objects into the cenotes, into this watery space. And as soon as it crossed that surface of the water, it was believed to enter the spirit world. It was believed to enter the underworld. So that the water, the ocean, the lake comes to represent the underworld. We see this represented in the story of Jonah in the belly of the whale. This whale comes up and consumes the prophet Jonah and then takes him down into the underworld. And this metaphorical meaning of Jonah descending under the surface of the water is picked up by Jesus in Matthew 12, verse 40, where he says, "Just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale, so too must the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth." So you see, even Jesus picks up on this metaphorical meaning of the water and the significance of descending into the underworld. The same exact mythic motif is employed in the act of baptism. In Romans chapter 6, verse 3, we read that baptism is a symbol of death, that an individual is baptized into the death of Christ, so that by descending under the surface of the water, you are in fact metaphorically or symbolically descending into death, into the underworld, and then metaphorically being raised up again. In the film Constantine, when the character wants to enter hell, Keanu Reeves puts her under the surface of the water in the bathtub, and then after a few moments she enters hell. So that the surface of the water, that's to say the act of descending into the water, that's to say metaphorically descending into the unconscious psyche, is the means of entering the spirit world. On January 20th, 2016, I'll be dealing with this subject in greater depth. So if you'd like to learn more about it, come and join us. The lecture starts at 6 o'clock.